St. Elmo's, just how OP is it? Right, first of all, short answer, it's not. It's actually not OP at all. It's no more powerful than a Police M4 with Strained, which is still 5th, 6th, depending on your build, in terms of overall DPS output. In a simplistic way of showing, if we just got a Police M4, through the attachments we can put 15% crit chance on there. St. Elmo's has 20. Cool, we're down 5% crit chance. But then on a Police M4, we can put Strained, Flatline, etc, etc. Strained is averaged out to about 25% critical hit damage, which is 5% more than the 20% attachment for St. Elmo's. Flatline would give a lot more than that because it's going to give a 15% amp to both our crits and our non-crits, which is worth more than 20% crit damage. See, in terms of stats, St. Elmo's is literally just a Police M4. I'm aware it's a LVOA-C exotic and it looks like one and the skin is based on one and it's meant to be one, but in terms of stats, it's a Police M4. A Police M4 that comes with 20% crit chance, 20% crit damage, 20% weapon handling, and a 70 round mag. Now I know a lot of people are ranting and raving about the 70 round mag, however, like I said in the previous video, it really doesn't actually need it. Like, it's nice, it's handy, but it's not really actually going to give you that much in the way of overall utility and performance. It is quite simply just a nice thing to have. As much as money doesn't buy happiness, but I'd rather have a cry and a wank in my Ferrari. The real MVPs are quite literally the other attachments for the 20% crit chance, the 20% crit damage, the 20% handling is also very nice, especially when paired with Strikers for another 15, or Heartbreaker, again for another 15, giving us a total of 35% handling. This is actually very nice, and on Strikers and Heartbreaker it turns this damn weapon into an absolute laser, which really does suit the weapon's aesthetic. I quite like this. It's visually pleasing. But anyway, back on topic. Is it OP? Well, no, it's really not, and we can do this through just a variety of DPS checks. So, up top we have St. Elmo's, 100% weapon damage, 15 from specialization, 15 from obviously the AR. We're running Obliterate, which is our 25% total weapon damage. In total, with Coyotes at short buff, we end up with 177 critical hit damage. Because it's an AR plus watch, we get 75 headshot, we have no damage to armor. I have re-rolled my St. Elmo's to damage the targets out of cover, and Strikers will give us an amplifier of 1. Dod-Foamath with Strained, it's basically the exact same. The only difference here is with Strained plus Coyote's Mask, missing the mod attachment, we end up with 182 critical hit damage. If we completely remove Strained and just rely on Coyotes, because we're going to go for a utility talent, preservation, future perfect, etc, etc, we end up with 157 critical hit damage. 157 plus 25 from Strained is 182. Problem solved. So, in terms of DPS, St. Elmo's would give us an average of 11.1 million. Dod-Foamath with Strained would give us an average of 11.4 million. Dod-Foamath with literally no talent whatsoever, you could be using utility talent, will give us an average of 10.7 million. This is 2 and a bit % less than Elmo's, with literally no talent on it whatsoever, which means in order to actually outperform Elmo's, we could put the worst damage talent on, measured, and still outperform St. Elmo's. So, all the people saying, oh, St. Elmo's is OP, it's amazing, bloody, bloody, blah. Have you tried a Dod-Foamath? Then we have the PvP argument, and I kind of, in a very loose way, touched on this in a video I did over the PTS. See, I'm still going to stick with the argument that St. Elmo's is only really going to be worthwhile on gear sets because you tend to be lacking crit chance or crit damage on gear sets. Negotiators, Strikers, Heartbreaker, hell, you could even now run a DPS Eclipse. It's all in the works, I'm still testing. I'll get back to you on some of these. Ongoing Directive is another one that a lot of people are throwing around. Because of St. Elmo's attachments, it's going to be very powerful on gear sets. However, on brand sets, it actually made the builds worse, simply just because of where the weapon, in terms of attachments, is very powerful. The weapon itself isn't, it's the attachments. In order to fit those attachments into a build, particularly a high-end build, you have to drop the capability of that overall build, which in the long run made it worse off. Typical high-end build for PVE, for example, would be 3-piece Providence, Contractors, Foxes, Coyote's Mask. You can't run that with St. Elmo's. You can't run the 2-piece Providence because the crit chance will give you too much than what St. Elmo's will give you. Between 2-piece Providence, St. Elmo's and a level 1000 watch, you are already at 40% crit chance without even just looking at other rolls. Now, I do imagine in terms of the talent, which is going to be incredibly frustrating in PvP, I do feel that the builds that will be utilising it are going to be considerably weaker. Now, this could potentially be gotten around by using your standard PvP build and just changing a few crit chance rolls to headshot or perhaps, I don't know, armor regen or Hasbro. It could potentially add a bit more variety in. However, in terms of overall output that this weapon is actually able to do, FAMAS will still beat it. A Police M4 with Flatline will still beat it. An F2000 will still beat it. I imagine the only real complication that this weapon is going to have in PvP is going to be the talent. And I won't lie, the talent in terms of PvP, I have no idea how that's really going to interact because I'm not a PvP player. What I can tell you is the talent in PvE is actually kind of really bad. I have had a few moments where the shock has saved my life when face tanking a Chunga on Legendary. The shock comes in, Chunga can't shoot you, you're essentially able to face tank him by him not actually being able to shoot you, so you're just facing rather than tanking. This is quite nice. However, being able to actively do this and utilise the shock mechanic when you need it is damn near impossible. It's just not going to happen. And if you are going to play around the shock, you're essentially making your entire build and utilizing your entire playstyle on what is essentially going to be a mediocre buff that is up every other magazine or every 2 magazines, which is not a very helpful way to play. Then there's the issue of when they are shot, they tend to duck down. They'll hit the floor. They don't stand there and go, I'm shocked, like a Chunga would. They tend to duck down. If they are already behind cover and you get a shock, you've now just potentially wasted your entire magazine, simply just because every time you hit them with shock, they're going to drop behind cover. You now can't shoot them. They stand back up. You hit them with another shock bullet and they go back behind cover. Rinse and repeat until you get absolutely frustrated with the entire mechanic. The actual only thing I would actively state is OP on this weapon is actually going to be the handling, simply because if you add it to something like Strikers or indeed Heartbreaker, the weapon turns into an absolute laser. This near enough removes complete mechanical fault of the player. The weapon is very, very stable. It takes minimal effort to actually keep the damn thing on point, which now means you're able to get more headshots, more DPS, or when they're behind cover, the enemies, when they put their little silly hand out and are somehow able to one-shot you with 100% accuracy, you're able to shoot them in the hand more regularly, equating to more DPS. Now for me, this is probably the most powerful part of this weapon, which is, like I said, the handling on certain builds, and it also does highlight the use and usability of handling on a variety of different builds. It's not something I would suggest to actively build into, simply because you can learn to aim better, but you can't learn to make a cap on a certain build's DPS do more DPS. which in a weird way makes this weapon very, very new player friendly. It has very, very high DPS. It's not the highest, it's not the most powerful, but it has very high DPS. It's easy to control and use. It can come in handy with the shock mechanic, but from my experience so far, it's mostly been annoying. Due to the attachments, you don't need to worry too much about trying to get maxed out rolls. So basically, if you're a new player, get this weapon, put 4-piece strikers on, try and get some crit chance, crit damage in there to try and get to around 50%. If you've got a Coyote's Mask, whack that on, and to be perfectly honest, you are ready for heroic. It is not the most powerful weapon, but it will seem like it just because of how easy it is to use. So yeah, it's not actually OP, it's actually incredibly balanced. Have fun, good luck, and don't die. It's bad for the health.